after 9 p.m, followed 2 minutes later by a second explosion.
We heard two explosions. At first I thought it was homemade bombs. There were lots of rumors circulating in the stadium.
But few of the 80,000 people packed into the stands for the France-Germany friendly were initially aware of the significance of what was happening and continued to cheer on their team despite the presence of a police helicopter circling overhead. The French President François Hollande, who was attending the game, was quickly rushed from the stadium. As the match ended, the news of multiple shootings and a hostage-taking in the east of the capital spread through the crowds. And an announcement over the loudspeaker told people to avoid certain exits, meaning many spilled onto the pitch.
Everything was fine. France won the game and we were happy. And then at the exits from the stadium, the atmosphere changed. There was a mass stampede. Everyone started to panic. It was really stressful. There were people everywhere. It was impossible to move.
It took 90 minutes for the whole stadium to be evacuated, but once complete, confusion and panic still reigned on the streets around the venue. One of the explosions happened in front of a fast food restaurant, the other in the close vicinity of the stadium. According to police sources, one, maybe both, were detonated by suicide bombers wearing belts packed with explosives.
Thomas Waterhouse there with that report. Let's bring you a bit more of the international reaction to what's happened. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel saying she's deeply shaken by the news and pictures that are reaching us from Paris. Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu declaring Israel stands shoulder to shoulder with President François Hollande and the people of France in our common war against terror. Well, we're going to go now to Iris Mackler, our correspondent.
Yes, I think there's no doubt that there's shock here, as there is all over the world. That reaction came very early, and there have been reactions all through the night. It's rolling news on Israeli television. So what we have heard from Israel's Prime Minister is that standing shoulder to shoulder, condolences to the French people, and later in the morning, a request to beef up security at the Israeli embassy and at other Jewish sites in case there's a continuation of this. Even though there's not at this moment a link back to Israel, I think they want it to be safe rather than sorry.
And of course, Iris, it comes amongst that ongoing terrible individual attacks we've been seeing in Israel and in the Palestinian territories as well. I'm sure a lot of just individual people across the region there feeling an awful lot of sympathy for those caught up in events here in Paris, bearing in mind what's been happening there over the last month or so.
Sympathy and shock, and empathy too. People here know what this means. There was an Israeli sports producer at the football last night, and afterwards police were saying don't panic, and he said, I'm Israeli, I'm used to this, I know what this is, I'm not panicking. So people here know what the people in Paris are going through. On both sides of the line here, Israelis and Palestinians, violence, unlooked for violence, comes into people's lives here. So there's a huge feeling of empathy, but nevertheless a feeling of shock. This is not what we expect to see in Paris, and certainly not with these numbers of dead, and certainly not in these circumstances.
And we have the readout from the White House now as well of that phone call between Presidents Obama and Hollande. What you have so far is what the Élysée, the French presidency, has given you, their point of view of the phone call between the two presidents. Here's what the White House says. It says that the US President Obama extended his condolences and also assured his steadfast, unwavering support for the people of France. And he pledged, the two presidents rather, pledged to work together to defeat the scourge of terrorism. That's the readout from the White House of this late-night phone call between Presidents Obama and Hollande. You just heard from US President Obama. He gave a very, very quick statement tonight, pretty much as soon as the news broke and before the Bataclan concert hall had even been raided by the French security forces. And indeed, President Obama spoke before the French president even addressed the French people from Paris. His message, though, of course, one of solidarity with the French people and with his French counterpart. The big quote from him, of course, being that this was not just an attack on Paris or France, but an attack on all of humanity. And you mentioned it there as well. There have been reinforced security measures here in the United States, largely symbolic in cities like New York City, where this just has to be done whenever a big terrorist attack happens in one of its allied countries. And we've heard from the Department of Homeland Security and from the FBI and from the Department of Justice as well tonight. The Department of Homeland Security says this: there is no specific or credible information of an attack on the US homeland. Of course, the United States is now looking at whether an attack like this one could be possible here as well in the coming days, whether there might be some kind of contact between groups who might want to attack the United States. At this point, US authorities are telling us that there is none of that, that there are no specific, there is no specific information of a possible attack of this nature in the United States as well.
Look, first of all, at some front pages in the French press. I think shock is really the word that sums things up the best. Let's start with Libération. They talk about carnage à Paris, carnage plural, you can see here, massacres. Same thing on the front page of Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien. They're talking about a terrorist massacre right in the heart of Paris. And you can see a photo there of rescue workers trying to help some of those victims. Aujourd'hui en France tells readers this time it's war, and that's a warning that is echoed on the front page of Le Figaro, the right-wing paper. You can see they're talking about war in the heart of Paris, la guerre en plein Paris, and you can see that masthead there in black. Le Figaro mourning here, similar black background on the front page of L'Équipe, the sports daily, with just one word, l'horreur, horror, over these multiple attacks.
So shock and horror, but also some calls for unity, a lot of calls for
That's right. If we take a look at the editorial in Libération, they call for unity in the face of this major challenge. The terrorists' barbarity has reached new heights, unprecedented levels. Never has France experienced this kind of violence, and it's France that's being targeted here. It's France's policies, it's France's international role, and Libération talks about the areas that were targeted by these attacks. These are areas where people go to have fun, to relax, to be together, and these areas were deliberately targeted to install terror, according to Libération, essentially to tell French people that they are under threat in their most basic, their most intimate, their most friendly lives. But Libération says French society must arm itself with courage in the face of this tragedy and not give in to what these killers want, which is essentially for everyone to be afraid. We must face the horror without forgetting our values of solidarity and human rights. Only a unified country that is true to its values can face this incredible challenge.
Now, you found a lot of people have been taking to Facebook, particularly to express their emotions over this.
That's right. Well. Facebook, Twitter, social media in general. I pulled out just a couple of emotions, but there's really a couple of examples rather. But there's really a wave of emotion. This is a cartoon, for instance, that's been circulating by a excuse me, a famous French cartoonist, illustrator, Joanne Sfar. You can see this character here saying the people who died tonight were outside to live, to drink, to sing. They didn't know that a war had been declared on them. And another image that's being shared quite a lot on social media is an image of Marianne. Marianne is a symbol of the French Republic, and you can see Marianne here shedding a tear with that black background and that date that will never be forgotten, of course, the 13th of November 2015, and lots of emotions and reactions coming out from around the world, lots of tweets, for instance, coming from abroad. I pulled out one example. This is a tweet coming out of New York City, the World Trade Center lit up with the colors of France, red, white, and blue.
Yeah, very nice to see. Now, the deadly attacks are also getting an awful lot of attention in the international press. That's
right. I pulled out a tweet which shows the extent of the coverage. It's a tweet which shows just a bunch of front pages, essentially, from across the world that are focusing on the deadly attacks. So just to pull out a couple of examples, The Independent, the British paper, on its front page, you can see here they're talking about massacre on the streets of Paris. Le Soir, that's a Belgian paper. Let's take a look. They're talking about the Black Friday in Paris with, once again, that black background. L'Orient le Jour, that's a Lebanese paper. A very interesting front page here. Essentially, they're drawing a parallel between the attacks in Paris last night and the twin suicide attacks in Beirut on Thursday. You can see they're talking about la même terreur, les mêmes larmes, the same terror, the same tears, and the same challenge for humanity that's been launched by these barbarians who are staining the name of God. And I pulled out another very powerful piece. This is from Die Welt, which says that once again, Paris is haunted by horrific attacks, but this time it's different. According to Die Welt, last night's attacks have a new dimension. The attacks of Friday the 13th will be felt a lot deeper than anything we have ever experienced in terms of terrorism in Europe, deeper almost in a psychological way. Why is that? Well, if we take a look at the title there of this article, it says, this is about us. This is about the way we live. And Die Welt says it's about our freedom, it's about our values. These are things that we have to fight for, according to Die Welt.
Yeah.